Skipping ain't easy, but it's necessary. I be getting weary, cause shit be getting scary. But sit back, relax, and don't you dare worry, cause I be hitting wrongs with a righteous fury. Yes, sir, see, I am the only one. My name is Josh Dunn, gonna have some fun telling the truth y'all can't handle. I might raise a scandal as I dismantle the fake, make them quake and make them shake. I make you bend, but never will I make you break. Just chill, yo, and don't be frightened. Open that closed mind, it's time to get enlightened. Welcome, folks, to Gimpin' Ain't Easy, 'cause it ain't, episode number 9. We're brought to you once again, as always, by Cafe Sempoal, where Outfront has turned into a jungle, where you can catch me at some point most afternoons looking like a sweaty and dehydrated Mowgli reading this week's feature book, Liberty or Death. It's Patrick French's 1997 account on India's rise to independence. So far, I'm particularly enjoying Patrick's pretty critical take on the 20th century's most famous holy man. We're also brought to you, once again as always, by Charlie's Club, where most shots are $2.75 on Tuesdays, and unfortunately some sad news to report as everyone's favorite old hot toddy broke his ankle while hopping the bar in pursuit of a tab dasher. Toddy's going to be out of work for 6 weeks, so I'd ask everyone to please donate generously to www.gofundme.com/Charlie-39S-Saves-Charlie-and-Todd. I heard a rumor that the perpetrator's name is Laura, so Laura, you should really make a donation to Toddy's GoFundMe. And when I catch up with you, I'm gonna pickpocket you. Even if I only get a couple lint-covered stale Mentos, I'm taking something from you. We're also brought to you this week by Super Brand for Hens. They're not doing much in this heat, but if you lick the blades, you'll forget how hot it is. Well, folks, miracle of miracles has happened, and I've gotten another grant. This is my third from Arts NS, and this one means a lot to me for a couple of reasons. First, because a collaborator was so negligent on the last grant, he forced me to be triple time overdue. I feared I'd never get another grant again. Well, now I don't have to hate him for ruining my career, 'cause it didn't happen. I'm free to hate him for other things now. I'm just Josh, and I'm overjoyed I can move on from that traumatic experience. This is important because, once again, it shows that a group of peers think my work means something. I think it does too, but it's nice to have that recognition and proper financing. It also gives me a lot of joy because I'll be able to pay other artists in this, a filmmaker, an editor, and a musician. I'm able to pay participants as well. So this should go as a lesson to all those disability organizations out there. If I can include money to pay participants in a budget just shy of $12,000, you can almost certainly find money to pay them in your north of $50,000 per year salaries. Also, a note to other disabled artists, Arts NS believes in paying participants for their time, so if you're writing a grant that includes the participation of other disabled folks, please think to include honorariums for them. It's the right thing to do. The film I'm going to do is called Our Hearts Aren't Disabled, and it chronicles the romantic experiences of 6, including me, of those of us who live with mobility challenges. This will be a heartfelt and difficult film. I think the best way to not exploit people's hardships is to pay them for their time. No one in the film is well off, and everyone could definitely use the Skrilla. Restriction from romance has been the hardest part of gimping for me personally. It may, and I don't want to pull any punches here, kill me someday. My real hope in doing the film is that it will help to remove such a fucking entrenched stigma and show that we are not only human, but desirable. It may ultimately save my life. It is, as I mentioned in the preview, folks, Gimpin' Ain't Easy 'Cause It Ain't, Episode 8. I'm here with, I've wanted to say, just because it was such a big part of my childhood, the only Sue I know is Sue Johansson, but this is not Sue This is not Sue Johansson, and she looks and has a different name now. I'm here with Sue Hutchinson. How are you doing, Sue?
I'm doing good. Yeah, hot but good.
Hot but good, yeah. That's I guess that's better than being cold but bad.
True enough.
We get that like 10 months of the year here, so you know. So I guess maybe I was just gonna ask a little bit about what you're up to. I know that you're over at Dal, and I know that you're a large part of your study focuses on leisure activities. And now, is that any hands-on stuff, or are you like strictly theory?
Well, so I used to work as what's called a recreation therapist.
Right.
Have you ever had to work with?
Would an OT factor into that?
So an OT would be really similar. So an OT is, kind of interested in helping people work or move or their housing. And part of what they do, they're interested in, kind of leisure. And rec therapists, that's kind of their main job, is how to help people do more of what matters to them, especially when they have barriers to doing that.
Right, and it was funny. Like I read an article that you co-authored with some others, and I guess previous in leisure theory, it was thought that the most intensive concentration requiring leisure activities were the best and perhaps the only that would do give any value. But your paper kind of destroys that theory, I think.
Yeah. Well. Yeah, I'd be really curious to hearing kind of what it is that you do in your free time and your leisure that kind of matters to you. And I guess for me, when I thought of those things that mattered to me, so even before I started doing research, when I thought of the work that I did, working with folks, most of the folks I worked with, it was in a rehab setting. And so people had been living their lives and then all of a sudden had some sort of an injury. And so then weren't able to go back to the lives that they had. And so part of my job was to help people figure out, well, what is it that still matters to me? Like, what kind of makes life worth living? And so I feel like I came to see that it wasn't those big things, let's climb a mountain or let's, jog a marathon. It wasn't those things that were necessarily meaningful. It was sometimes really small moments of enjoyment that had deep meaning. So that kind of resonated with my own way that I look at leisure and in my own life.
Right. I think almost the way I might put that is it's like making the mundane meaningful. The mundane isn't so mundane after all. Exactly.
That's exactly how I look at it.
Yeah, right. Because when you become restricted from things and isolated, I mean, I've been disabled my whole life, right? Mm-hmm. So I don't really know any other way. There's been certain extra symptoms since I've become an adult, but knock on real wood here, they're all chronic and not critical. So I'm able to live and all of that. But what do you think? Like, would you notice in the work that you were doing, particularly as a rec therapist and things like that? How were folks that were disabled, were they treated properly by the staff?
That's a great question. So I would say, I have a bunch of different kind of thoughts around that. One is, I think a lot of my job ended up not only about helping people to figure out, okay, what is it that does really matter to me and how can I still do it, even if my abilities have changed, but it was also to kind of learn how do you still feel like you have the right to do those things? How do you kind of let people, or go out into public settings where people often may feel stigmatized, right? And, or feel people are looking at them. So how do you help people be advocates for themselves when people are feeling like they need to follow the orders that they're given by their doctor or their therapist? So I think a lot of those kind of things that help people to be more self-determined, to do more, again, to kind of do more of what matters to them, ended up being my job. But the work I'm doing now is actually around how to change, how to educate people who work in community, particularly community recreation settings, to be more welcoming and inclusive. So you would think recreation people are all like, obviously offer wonderful opportunities, but I think a lot of people do come with their own attitudes and, stigmas and perceptions. And so part of my job, I see my job is to really help people look at people and their role in creating those welcoming environments differently.
Right, and I'm going to give a specific example. I think that speaks to exactly what you're talking about. Like, there might be, on the one hand, this assumption that, this is recreation, so everybody's having fun and being inclusive and all these things. But that is not always the case. And one of the most glaring examples that sticks in my mind was actually in grade 12. I was in a comparative world religions class. And the teacher had wonderful connections all throughout all kinds of different religious communities in town. I think his dad was like a missionary in India, so he grew up like his first 10 years in India and stuff. And so he had a really cool perspective on things. But he took us to the Taoist Center down there on, I don't know if that's still there, on like North Park or wherever. But so the fella running that, he was kind of like a poor man's Tommy Chong. And, he kind of like ignored me for the whole thing, right? Then like towards the very end, he was like, oh, and I think, I might have a couple exercises our friend on the floor can do now. And like, he meant well, right?
Yeah,
but it was just like, he didn't address me the whole time.
Yeah.
So like, why address me with like 5 minutes left in the
Exactly.
in the thing, right?
So people can sometimes, I think a lot of times people don't know what to do, right? And so sometimes, they'll either ignore the situation or be overly like, how can I help you, young man? Or whatever, be over patronizing.
You can help me by speaking a little quicker.
Yeah, and not so loud. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And so I think generally, like, everybody's pretty well-meaning. I mean, but I think a lot of people just sometimes don't know what to do. And so I see before my job was to help individuals, who, again, to be able to access recreation or leisure opportunities. And now I feel like a lot of my responsibility is, because I know there are wonderful people helping folks. My job is really to try and help organizations change and help people. And, like I want, for example, organizations to say it really matters to us to actually like create these environments where people are actually want to be there, that they feel welcome, that they, can take risks to be able to do what matters to them.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's really key too, like once they actually get there, because I think a lot of these folks have the literature down pretty well, but when you put that literature into practice, sometimes it doesn't quite
exactly
translate. And I kind of like too how you've moved, because it's almost like you've gone from like the bottom up to like the top down perspective, right? So you have experience with both the individual and then the greater social structures at large, right? So,
and I think that's the problem if we just focus on individuals. Is like, well, I'm going to fix you.
Right.
My job is to, and then it becomes, it's like your problem to fix, and it isn't, right? It is actually a shared responsibility.
Right.
And I think that's the problem with some of the health promotion stuff that's just focusing on, okay, we're going to give individuals education, individual skills. It's like, well, no, actually, a lot of the organizations and programs, they're the ones who need the information and skills too.
Right. No. It's like how if it's just an individual kind of like how does that manifest in society or getting along in the world? Like, I spend a lot of time alone, and some of that is by choice for sure. Like I probably need much more alone time than the average person, but for the average person, and there needs to be stuff to get them involved and feeling connected in some small level. And I think too, like, because people might think recreation therapy, like it's not necessarily just like exercise, although I think that can be a big part of it. But I think, at least from what I've gleaned from what you're saying, it's about finding meaning.
Exactly. Finding a sense of meaning, feeling like that you have, or you're doing stuff that aligns what is important to you or with your values, to be able to feel like you can have a sense of purpose or make some contribution. That contribution might just be like what you're doing right now. Like, this is a huge contribution by creating an opportunity for people to hear your story and for others to share their own. So, I mean, I think not everyone, like, we all need other people, but not everyone wants to be just a recipient of services. We want to feel like we actually have something valuable to contribute. And I feel like that is where it becomes important to kind of help create the conditions for that, for everybody.
Yeah, I think it's much more empowering that way, because it's great to receive help and charity. And in fact, I couldn't live without some of the charity that I receive, but I have to be up to something productive. Otherwise, I don't feel valuable about myself.
Yeah,
I feel
exactly.
like a loser and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Have you, like, now that you've moved to, actually, first I'll talk about, like, so when you were working with individuals, did you have, like, some people that were just, like, so down about just their disability or injuries that, like, they just didn't want to participate at all in any of this stuff?
Absolutely. I mean, it seems like there sort of was two extremes. I think some people who felt like, I'm going to do absolutely everything to get my body and mind working perfectly again before I would ever think about, recreation.
Right.
So in a way, they would just see like they have to get back to this perfect body or perfect mind, and then, kind of would sort of focus on recreation, maybe seeing recreation or leisure as more trivial or, as not a core part of living life. And I think then there were other people who were like almost sort of denying their feelings, and they were all, like, I don't know if you probably have heard that sort of the idea of the super crip, right? Where people are like, I'm going to go and, climb the mountain in my wheelchair, and, I'm going to do this
Take
and
that,
that.
Terry Fox.
Yeah, exactly. And that's extremes of, and so in a sense, also not taking time to actually think about, okay, like, who am I? What really matters to me? So just getting so focused in this over kind of like this extreme pursuit of, kind of whatever those, I don't even know what you call those things, but activities. And so I think that there were those two extremes. I think that, and people wanting to wait, as I said, kind of wait till they got better. And then I think a lot of, some people who were injured, may have been injured through their leisure or recreation passions.
Oh, that's interesting.
Right? And so I think a part of sort of the thing that mattered to them the most is that, maybe what have caused their injury. And so having to come to grips with, well, how do I still, how do I still, again, sort of help be the person that I am and want to be as this risk taker or this whatever it is, and but yet I can't do these things I used to do.
Right, like that'd be a hard one. I'm thinking, like, because if I was like a mountain climber who fell off the mountain and survived, and I love the risk, and that's what got. I mean, I don't know, like you might have to, like, I don't know, become a risky investor or something like that to get that. But you have to be really creative, right? To think about what the substitute for that might be.
Exactly. And I think sometimes a lot of the people who I worked with in rehab too, they were like, had been working like workaholics, or like totally invested in their families and had maybe never made time for leisure or recreation. It just, again, it kind of wasn't that important to them. And so then all of a sudden, they've had this extreme, or this change in their lives and had never actually taken time in their adult life to think, well, what is it that makes me happy? What is it that I value? How do I express my values and the things that I do? And I think that process of having to sort of reconnect with yourself in order to, figure out how to do those things, or be in the way that you want to be is actually really it's hard work.
Yeah, no, and I think that is like more indicative of our society than cause, I don't have a regular job and I have a lot of time on my hands, but I think more often than not, like the average person is just so busy, right, just taking care of their responsibilities that they don't have the time to figure out like who they really are or what really might make them tick or make them real happy, So somebody that. But I think like an injury or setback could almost and although it might be really challenging and difficult at first, like I think you might find out more about your true nature that way, potentially, right?
I had that was one of the most transformative experiences for me, was working with a guy who was in his early 30s, I guess, who had really would describe his major kind of pastime. He had been a painter and like a house painter. And so the majority of his time was spent in the bars after he was working. And that was a very legitimate pursuit, right? Everybody goes to the bar after you work, right? Yeah. And he ended up getting hit he wasn't crossing in a crosswalk, got hit by a car and ended up having a brain injury. And and it was tough. He lost his friends. He lost his job. He lost his, he had been in a partnership. He lost his partner. And, but he ended up being able to say, you know what? It was actually a good thing that happened to me, because I realized that the life I was leading actually wasn't a life I was really happy with. I wasn't, he was sort of going through the motions rather than living with some level of intention. Yeah. And so he was able to say, like, I don't know if he would go as far as to say, I'm glad that it happened to me, because nobody wants to be, right. But he would say, I really actually learned a lot from, and he was, the last that I ran into him, he was helping out with a volunteer kind of floor hockey program. Oh, cool. And then he was doing volunteer work with the Brain Injury Association, and he loved his life. He had created these social connections with people. He had meaning, like really an important role, right, in his life. And so, it's totally different than the life that he had led, but yeah.
Well, and that just goes to show you, folks, sometimes drinking buddies aren't real friends.
That's right.
But I like that. And yeah, it's been a large part of what's helped me, just like finding meaning. Because as, a younger fella, I was quite depressed, and I didn't know what I went to King's for a while and this and that. And, then I started getting into like movies and music and was eventually able to become an artist out of that. And I certainly still get down sometimes, but it's like even when I'm not particularly successful, I don't feel like a loser in the way that I did, because I always knew like I was fairly bright and all that, but it's like, I was just going to the bar every day and it felt really shitty.
Yeah. Huh.
Yeah.
So how did you end up sort of discovering what it was that mattered to you?
Well, I think, one thing what was happening was that while I was in the bars all the time, I was clowning around a lot and joking, and it's like, oh shit, like I can be like pretty funny in the context of a situation, so like let's see what I can do there. And then I became a comedian, right?
Very
cool. So that happened, and then I sort of, and I still like doing comedy, and I've actually got a big show end of August. I think it's like some Eastlink taping or something.
Very cool.
But in doing that, I kind of like, I don't really fit in that well socially, and probably that speaks to just me being weird or whatever. But I sort of became I did a serious mostly serious one-man theater show that actually Mark helped just do the latest version of in May, and I realized I wanted to get into more serious things as like more of a like a cultural critique kind of stuff, or I felt I could say more with not having to try to hit a punchline every second, like especially in a bar, right? 'Cause, I mean, I'll do dick jokes sometimes, but like I don't necessarily, and I'm not saying as a comedian you have to do that or anything, but sometimes your audience does expect more like crass material, things like that. So if I can just be, if I, like in this, like I have funny sponsors and things like that and all that, but I also I'm able to delve into like more serious subject matters. So I kind of want to wear both of the drama masks at once if I can.
That's very cool.
Yeah. So so we were talking about how just the difficulty with individuals, and now that you've moved into the trying to make these organizations more open to being inclusive and things like that. Have you encountered much resistance there? Or?
Oh, that's a great question. Not to out any organizations.
Out them here if you want.
I think kind of what happens is they say, "Oh, we have an inclusion policy, like we're doing, like, or or they might say, "Oh, we're not. Anybody can come to our programs." So I think that there's this kind of superficial kind of responses to that social responsibility. It's like, right. Oh, I'm going to put the pink ribbon on my, coat, and then I'm really, aware of the issues. So I think, so I kind of see that happening in some places that there's some sort of, I don't know, some rhetoric around, yes, this matters, but really, not sort of really getting into actually making changes in their organization or their staff practices or even who they're hiring, right? And so...
Yeah, it's that phone ringing again. This is terribly professional of me. Why do people listen, you hoopleheads out there, listen to this? I record a podcast on Wednesday evenings, so you don't need to be calling me during this time, okay? No, I think that's totally bang on the money, and probably people are doing like some little things, but it often is sort of tantamount to just pure tokenism,
Exactly.
And, like nobody wants to be wrong.
Yeah.
We're already, maybe what you have in existence isn't very good. Maybe it is, but actually here are our latest theories and tested practice, and this is why this works. Are you aware of this? And it's like, oh, if we are and that's what we're doing, great. But if not, why wouldn't you want to improve your service, right? This is the way I look at things, right? Why?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Give the best possible product to people that you can.
And I guess that's the thing that is so exciting to me about what you're doing here is that I personally believe the people who need to be doing the education are people like you. Like it's right. You who is the one who no one gives a crap what I'm going to say. I'm just seen as another, academic. But actually, I think if you and others, who live with a disability were to go into organizations and actually work with organizations to make change, then that is, I kind of personally believe that's where the real change is going to be. I just feel like as an academic, I actually, I could easily be just seen as yet another academic. So do you know what I mean?
Totally. Yeah. And even I even the article, right, it was pretty heavy theory, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I thought the case studies referenced were great, but I was hoping it would be almost I was looking forward to reading the thing all about that, to see these real specific examples and what they were doing, and perhaps some funny quotable moments that you probably couldn't get away with publishing in a paper, that kind of stuff. But yeah, I guess because I do this for every interview, and thank you, by the way, for saying that it's folks like me that need to be going in there, because I agree with that. And I think so often just the nature of disability and how society often views us can, beat us down so much that like I'm very reticent to deal with any organization, right? So like that's not saying I won't. Certainly, if they're willing to pay me, then I'm certainly all ears, and it will at least try, But yeah, I'm kind of. This is a very egotistical thing to say, but things work well when I'm the boss.
Exactly.
And I've noticed this, like people, like I did out of St. George's Youth Net way back in '04. I was like 20, turning 21, and I did like tours of the neighborhood. I was able to employ a couple high school kids, and
cool.
like they love, you know what I mean. And I knew what their strengths and weaknesses were, and I knew like the psychology of how to play to that, and they certainly did not feel bad working for me.
Yeah.
So,
can I just ask, in your experience of working, sort of interacting with the healthcare system, would there be mostly focus on kind of your physical abilities, or would they actually, kind of try and understand and support you in terms of like your emotional or mental health needs? Because I guess I wonder to what extent our health system is still kind of privileges, just getting the body better.
Right. I would assume a fair bit. That said, though, I haven't I had 10 surgeries, but they all took place, like the last one was just before I turned 12, and I have some urinary tract issues now, but they're not the way medical science is. Like, they can't really help me without ways that could potentially compromise and make it way worse, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I just sort of have to deal with it. So like with that in mind, like I see a foot nurse from time to time, and I see like my family doctor a bit, but I don't deal with many health care, and a lot of that is by choice. Like I'm sure if I wanted to, I could be up on them about every little thing and whatever and stuff. But I don't. I feel like it'd be futile. And in terms of the mental health stuff, this is just assumption on my part. I feel like it's in there now, but I'd be very leery because I've always been, with all my other issues, like even if I did have some elements of mental illness, like I've probably got some bipolar tendencies and stuff like that, but I don't have time to have those problems. Like it just would, and that's not to take away anything from anybody suffering there, but and how they want to identify or whatever. Like that's cool, but so much of that, like I think and this isn't talking about somebody that's got severe schizophrenia who's on a different plane of existence altogether, but a lot of the just mental health issues I think stem from simply not having a purpose in life, lack of existential purpose, right? I
really agree with you.
So, and then if you get clinically just talking about being down and all, like for me, like that wouldn't really help me too much. Like I think I would just feel worse, honestly.
For sure.
But yeah, I mean, if it helps some people, like awesome, know. So, I wanted to ask a little, because I do this for every interview. I wanted to ask a little bit about behind the Sue, I guess.
Okay.
So tell the folks out there, whatever you like, I guess. What was your childhood like? What kind of scenario did you grow up in?
I grew up really lucky. So I had parents who actually prioritized leisure and recreation. So I think
cool.
So my dad, kind of had different jobs, and and there was times that he was without work, a couple of different times. And one of the first times that he didn't have work, he got our family a used tent trailer. And we went camping, right? And then another time that he didn't have work, he ended up putting in a pool in our backyard. And so I think he was a wonderful role model. Like we would play cards at home. And so I feel like I grew up with this family that believed that having fun together was, just important. So even though my dad was young when he passed, he was only 54.
Oh, wow.
But he had been, like a major drinker, major smoker, and he lived life, pretty major eater. And but he lived his life pretty big. So, I mean, people might look at my life and go, oh, well, your dad was an alcoholic, but really, like as a kid, what I saw was, here's some, here's people that oops, I just hit the mic. Here's, they would, music, CCR music would go on, and my mom and dad would dance in the living room. So I think they were actually fantastic role models. And that made a huge difference for me. But it wasn't until, I had always wanted to go back to school and just kind of didn't have the confidence. So nobody in my family had gone on to higher education. And so, and I had been married when I was real young. I was only 20, and I ended up getting married to somebody who was, actually very abusive. And he was like, I married you working, you stay working. And so I think I had, I kind of thought, okay, well, I'm not going to be able to go back to school. And I had left that situation. I was actually living in a shelter, and then went and lived at my aunt and uncle's in their basement of their apartment. And I had been working in a department store. I lost my job, and sort of things kind of went downhill pretty quickly. And I remember reaching out to a couple of people I'd worked with at the department store to see if I could connect with, because I felt very alone, and wondered if I could connect with anyone. And of course, people are busy leading their lives, and then I wasn't part of their workplace. And so I just recall, Josh, so vividly. I was like, okay, I'm going to be gone soon if I don't do something here.
Right.
Like I'm going to lose myself. I'm going to go over the edge and not get back. And so I remember so vividly forcing myself to go down into my aunt and uncle's basement and pull out my sewing machine and making myself sew. And that kind of experience, and at the time, sewing wasn't leisure or recreation for me, right? It was something that I knew at some level I used to do, and I knew that I could do it well, and I knew that I had to do something to help myself. Like I couldn't just be a victim of, every part of my life as a victim. And so I did. I ended up making myself sew. And that was a huge turning point for me, because I thought, if I can find something in my life to help myself, like I want to help. I think everybody can find something in their life that they actually are good at and that matters to them. And that's what, when I took my program in rec therapy, I thought I wanted to help people learn to do arts and crafts. I had no idea that recreation therapy would be a much broader kind of focus. And it was, I loved the work that I did, and I feel, so lucky to have actually found something, to work at that was so meaningful.
Yeah, that's really cool. I guess I have a few things to say to that. I mean, you talk about your dad living large, but at the same time, that was... I think there's a difference between like being an alcoholic and a drinker and a bad drunk, right? Because if he was acting good, then that was definitely like enjoyable childhood experience. So that's really cool. And it's funny because you sort of answered another question already. Because Mark was saying that he thought, oh well, she probably hasn't had any hardships, but you just leveled about 5 on me, right? So because I did like to ask about that, and I love that you already had the answer for overcome, at least to some degree, right? Because that sewing was able to bring you back to a place of something you knew you were good at,
exactly.
Right? It helps to build the esteem. It gives purpose. So that's the thing. I think that's something.
Exactly.
At first, maybe you just have to find something you enjoy, but then to build that little skill in it to actually get somewhat good.
Exactly.
That's when you can get to the next level, I think.
Exactly. And again, it goes back to kind of where we started this interview, that it doesn't matter what that thing is.
No,
like
that's
that,
right.
it could, for me, it was sewing. I mean, for somebody else, it could, it could be looking after an animal or, whatever it is. It really kind of doesn't matter what the it is.
The
It's
fastest Rubik's Cube changer.
yeah, exactly. So, yeah, and I feel like, yeah, and again, I would sort of say I was lucky that I had that, it was a very, it was a very challenging time, but I feel lucky though that through that, I was able to find, that kind of an area that really mattered to me.
Yeah, no, totally. And I mean, anybody that says, well, I'm married, you working, so you're staying working, that's not the kind of fella to stay with. He doesn't
exactly.
support. Yeah, that in some ways it's almost better than I don't want you working at all, because that could be more oppressive,
Yeah.
But that's still pretty bad. So treat folks with respect, I guess, people.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and help support them in their dreams within reason. If I was to tell you, well, I'm going to be a pitcher in Major League Baseball, that probably isn't too realistic because I'm already 35. So most careers would just be winding down now. But what would you say some of your greatest accomplishments have been?
That's such a hard one for me. I feel like, well, I mean, it sounds kind of corny to say like the work that I was doing, but part of my accomplishments, I think, were, in being able to work with people who other people had given up on.
Right.
And then helping that person actually have like a, holy shit, this is fantastic experience. And as one example, for a part of my work, I had worked in long-term care. And so there were a number of young adults, so people your age, who were living in this, long-term care facility with a bunch of old people. It was a horrible environment.
Yep.
Imagine if you had to move into a place like that tomorrow and, you're told, what to do and when to eat, and you're given, it's a horrible environment for anyone. But I would say, particularly for young people. And there was this young guy who had been working in the mines and ended up having, he became paralyzed because of the kind of toxins in the working in the mill or in the mine. And one of the things that he wanted to do was he wanted to go to the bar and see some strippers.
Right.
And so I was like, okay, let's go and do it. And so we went to the bar and sitting in the front row, and the gal came in front of him, and he ended up actually standing up and went to reach out to her. And then from that point forward, he actually kind of got back to walking, and he was able to move out into a group home after that. And I was like, yahoo!
You hear that,
motivation.
folks? This is the Gimpin' Ain't Easy exclusive. Strippers might be able to make you walk again. That's awesome. And see, I love the attitude toward that too, right? Because it's legal, the club's open. Nobody's going to go to jail for this, right? I mean, unless he didn't actually grope or anything.
No, that was. But I feel like, sort of the accomplishment was, challenging stereotypes to actually make something happen that was really important to this person. So that, honestly, in a kind of weird way, that was an accomplishment. I would say from a more sort of kind of serious, kind of accomplishment is that I was, when I went back so I had been working as a rec therapist and then decided to go back to school. And then ended up getting pregnant. And then, so when my son was 5 months old, I decided to go back to do my PhD.
Oh, wow.
And so I had never driven into the States before, had never even really been in the States before. And so I have this wonderful 5-year-old son drive down to Georgia to go to school. Didn't have a place organized to live and didn't have hardly anything in terms of money. And so I did my PhD when I went back to school, with a kid and ended up doing what I do now because of that. So I feel, I look at it now and I sort of think, did I actually get that done and accomplish that? But to me that was an accomplishment.
Yeah, that's pretty wild. A PhD, especially with a small child, like what a tremendous workload and time sacrifice, which also shows that you can obviously really focus on something if you put your mind to it. So you've got that level, and also we can't forget helping a fellow get independent again vis-a-vis strippers. So those are.
Yeah.
Are we going to go to the strip club, Mark? No, we're not. He doesn't want my health to get any better, apparently. Oh boy, that was mean. Okay, I've got one more, but just before is there anything you'd like to add?
No, I don't think so. I mean, actually, it was funny. I was talking to a friend, telling them that I was going to be doing this, and she was like, well, you should say about, these papers and, those papers. But honestly, even though I shared my papers with you, my papers really don't have that much meaning to me. I think they're, part of what I need to do as part of my job. But I think, the thing I miss most about working so I teach students in recreation therapy, but honestly, I really miss actually working with real people and, in the rec therapy area. So.
No, and I'm totally glad that you had that experience, because I was like, we were like just slightly considering canceling because I read the paper and I didn't really know, like I could ask like one or two questions on it, but I was like, oh, and then when we got into it, you had, and I had some other questions I could ask you and things like that. But because if I had to do the interview on that alone, then I don't think that. But we touched on it, right? Yeah. So that was really cool, and I guess I'm going to close off by asking what I ask everybody. What do you think the meaning of life is?
Ooh, the meaning of life. I think it kind of goes back to what we've been talking about. It's about living a life of meaning.
I agree, and whatever that might be, and maybe if someone doesn't know, take some time to find out, and maybe enlist some help to find out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And again, kind of recognizing it doesn't have to be big things. It's just even the smallest thing that as long as that it has that meaning, it can make a difference.
Right. No, I love it, folks. Whatever it is, no matter how small, if it gets you over that hump from having a meaningless existence to something that you can actually look forward to, that's where it's at. Folks, she's been Sue Hutchinson. I've been Josh Dunn, and this has been Gimpin' Ain't Easy, Episode 9. Remember, folks, look yourselves in the mirror, give yourselves that Ric Flair, woo! And tell yourself, I am the greatest of all time, because you are. I know I am. Good night, folks.